Content warning for suicide, some graphic imagery, and spooky stuff. Oh, and if you're easily startled, I'll have timecodes in the description for any jump scares. And spoiler alert for The Haunting of Bly Manor, as well as for The Haunting of Hill House, and also some stuff Henry James wrote in the late 1800s, if 150-year-old novellas can be spoiled at this point. And finally, this is your regular reminder that these are just my opinions and are subjective. So, let's get to it. In 2018, The Haunting of Hill House bowled us over with its singular story of the Crane family haunted by traumas and ghosts. People were immediately chomping at the bit for more stories, and the creators made it very clear that if there were going to be more hauntings, it would be about a new family, a new house, and new ghosts. In February of 2019, they announced the follow-up would be titled The Haunting of Bly Manor, based on Henry James' gothic horror novella, The Turn of the Screw. And in October of 2020, the new season came out, and I had the privilege of interviewing showrunner Mike Flanagan about it. So let's dive in.
There was a lot of talk about how could this not be some kind of cynical follow-up to a show that we all really believed was over. So part of that was, well, I wanted there to be thematic echoes. I wanted us to kind of rhyme with Hill House at times, but I wanted it to be a very different show. I didn't want us to just redo what we did, but there was still stuff like, well, we have to say Forever House. And someone has to say, I can fix it. And it just can't be Henry.
The obvious difficulty with a second season of Hill House would always be how to approach it, and the answer was soon reached that this would be an anthology show in a similar vein to American Horror Story. Each season is self-contained, although we see some familiar faces throughout. This is a new story, one that rhymes rather than repeats. I honestly didn't think much about Season 1 while I was watching Bly Manor, although I did clock those fun little Easter eggs.
The Forever House.
I can fix it.
There's a particularly heartbreaking one I'll tell you about later too. But Bly Manor slowly pulled me into its ghostly embrace, much in the way that The Haunting of Hill House did. And with that, let's do the rundown. For The Haunting of Bly Manor, Mike Flanagan was the showrunner. He wrote and directed the first episode, and he oversaw the plot and direction for the whole season, while other writers and directors worked on the other 8 episodes. The other directors on the roster for this season were Kieran Foy, Liam Gavin, Axel Carolyn, E.L. Katz, and the directing team Yolanda Ramke and Ben Howling, who co-directed the Australian zombie film Cargo, which I highly recommend, by the way. For the writer's room, along with Mike Flanagan and his brother James, they brought in Diane Ademu-John, Laurie Penny, Angela Lamanna, Rebecca Leigh Klingel, the Clarkson twins, Leah Fong, and Julia Bicknell. And every one of those writers gets a credit on an episode, but it sounds like they all worked pretty close, planning out the series before they went off to write their individual episodes. Then we have our cast, with some new and familiar faces. Victoria Pedretti played Nell Crane in Season 1, and in Season 2 she's Danny Clayton, the new au pair for the Wingrave family. There's Henry Thomas, who played Hugh Crane last season, and this season he's Henry Wingrave, the distant uncle who hires Danny to look after his niece and nephew at Bly Manor. Then there's Oliver Jackson-Cohen, formerly playing Luke Crane in Season 1, and in Season 2 we find him as the devilish and damaged Peter Quint, Henry's former assistant who was up to no good. Then we have Tahira Sharif as Rebecca Jessel, the former au pair at Bly, who died tragically. Flora and Miles Wingrave are the niece and nephew Danny looks after at Bly. They're played by Amelie Bia-Smith and Benjamin Evan Ainsworth, respectively. Oh, and Amelie Bia-Smith's biggest role prior to this was Peppa Pig, so have fun with that knowledge. Then we've got Tania Miller as Hannah Gross, the housekeeper at Bly, who keeps seeing this crack in the wall, but I'm sure it's fine. Rahul Kohli plays Owen Sharma, the cook who is wholesome as fuck and loves a bad pun.
You're a battered woman.
And Amelia Eve plays the prickly gardener Jamie, who quickly takes a shine to Danny.
Chin-up Poppins.
Then there's Carla Gugino, who played Olivia Crane in Season 1. In Season 2, she's our narrator, telling this tale to us and an audience the night before a wedding. Kate Siegel, who played Theo in Season 1, shows up as Viola Willoughby Lloyd, but we'll get to her later. That about covers the basics. So, what's the story? Well, it begins with some creepy images of this lake while a woman speaks the lyrics to a song called O Willow Waly.
We lay, my love and I, beneath the weeping willow.
Then we jump to this woman, waking up in a chair to look at this half-open door. We're not going to learn much about her for a while, so don't sweat it, because it's time for a wedding. Or a wedding rehearsal.
The rehearsal dinner, for God's sakes.
We watch this man give a speech about watching your loved ones grow old and die, which is a wild thing to say before a wedding, but as he's giving this speech, we see that same woman from before sit down at the table and make a lot of meaningful eye contact with the man giving the toast. That night, they all sit around a cozy fire, trading ghost stories until...
I have a story.
She said, guess what, bitch?
She's like...
Y'all wanna play?
Our narrator has a story. She tells her audience it's not a short story, and it's not hers. But everybody sits down to listen, and we get our story. We go back to London in the year 1987. We even get a fanny pack and a paper map to remind us that, hey, it's the 80s. But anyways, we're in London, following Danny Clayton, an American who's gone to live in London to escape some traumas back home. She interviews for an au pair position for the Wingrave family at Bly Manor. This man, Henry Wingrave, is looking for somebody to keep an eye on his niece and nephew since he's too busy and their parents are dead. And right away, we get a sense that Henry's got some issues.
What's the catch? What makes a woman of your age want to give up her life to take care of someone else's children?
And also, as vulnerable as Danny might seem, she does not fuck around.
I saw your ad 6 months ago, and I have seen it every month since. So I suppose you're right. What is the catch?
I love this scene for just how much we learn about these two through their interactions. Danny's nervous chatter at the start while Henry's pouring liquor in his tea in the middle of the day. And the way their tone changes throughout the scene as the gloves come off makes for a curious and fascinating interplay. Afterwards, she's looking at want ads in a bar since that interview was such a disaster, and oh, look who's here. And Danny is apparently the sort of person who's willing to have this interaction.
That was the most awkward job interview of my entire life. So, I think we should toast to it, Mr. Wingrave. Or do you prefer it in your tea?
Holy shit, Danny! I think my favorite part is that we just hard cut to both of them being like 2 drinks in and genuinely chatting with each other. Like, that was enough to break the ice, and now they're just talking. Danny asks what the catch was for the au pair job, and Henry tells her the last au pair died, and people think the job is cursed or something. Then he asks her what her catch is, and, well...
I couldn't be home anymore.
There's a lot she doesn't say, but the thing she emphasizes here is...
I could make a difference. A real difference. With just 2.
So the next thing we know, she's headed to Bly Manor. We quickly meet Owen Sharma, the cook who doesn't love living in this idyllic countryside.
I've actually never liked Bly. The people, most of them, they're born here, they die here. And it's easy to get stuck.
And the housekeeper Hannah Gross, who is warm and kind, but also a bit distracted and sad, lighting candles for lost loved ones on the daily. We also meet the 2 Wingrave children, Miles and Flora.
Perfectly splendid. So pleased to meet you, my lady.
Oh.
Initially, they both seem precocious.
And it's perfectly splendid.
And polite.
I just wanted to say how happy we all are that you're here.
Although we get several hints that something is amiss, whether it's Miles ogling Danny while she's getting undressed, or Flora's sudden turns when she sees Danny wearing this comb in her hair, or picking this particularly creepy doll up off the floor.
Put her back. She stays there.
Also, there's a mysterious man up on the parapet who just stares at Danny. When she asks the others, they say she must have imagined it. Then, at the end of the episode, the 2 children ask Danny to get something out of this closet and lock her in.
Guys!
Which is very bad. One thing I find maddening and fascinating is that, much like in season 1 where there was a therapist giving out pretty decent advice except for the fact that he didn't realize ghosts were real, Danny also doesn't realize she's in a horror TV show. This leads to many scenes of like,
we don't go in there anymore.
Oh, don't go in there.
You have to promise me. Don't leave your room at night.
No, Danny, don't do that.
Hide and seek.
hide and seek? Sure.
In this creepy house? Danny, I swear to God. I know this is a common trope in horror media, the whole girl get out of there bit. What I find interesting about Danny is that while she is perpetually just doing things that are a bad idea, she does them kind of bravely. There's that saying about the bravest people are the ones who are afraid and do the thing anyway, and that's Danny to a T. She might be scared shitless when she sees a weird ghost man out the window, but that won't stop her from grabbing a poker and getting ready to go fight a ghost. I just really like that about her character. In episode 2, we see more of the weird creepy shit happening in this house, like, what's up with those footprints? There's this crack in the wall that only Hannah sees, but I'm sure it's nothing, right? We also learned a bit about how Miles got kicked out of school. First by throwing himself out of a tree and getting in a fight with his friend, and eventually he escalated to murdering a priest's pet bird. After he's been expelled, we learn that Flora had sent him a letter, and this might have been the reason for his intense behavior. In the present day, Danny has the kids doing chores as punishment for the whole locking her in the closet thing. I love this scene with Jamie and Hannah watching them work in the garden.
On a scale of 0 to American, how would you rate her?
American.
But she's still kind of struggling to manage these two kids who continue to be kind of wild in their own particular ways.
It's such a draining thing. Dealing with children.
Oh, no. In one scene, Flora's trying to be helpful and unpack Danny's things for her, and she finds this pair of glasses.
I didn't break them. They were like this already.
It's fine. It's fine.
Afterwards, Danny needs to go outside and have a little panic.
You alright?
Jamie finds her there and kinda helps her calm down.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
Anytime.
I love this scene. Of course, then she lets the kids play a game before bed and they choose hide and seek, which goes as badly and weirdly as you might expect.
I'll find you. Ears up.
Then she goes running after the kids and sees that man again. This time he's at the window looking creepy as shit. So this queen grabs a poker and runs outside to yell at a ghost.
Gonna call the fucking police!
Then Miles appears at the window and says,
I don't feel so good.
and collapses. Danny and Hannah go running to check on him, and he wakes up and seems okay-ish. But unbeknownst to both women, that man is there at the window again, smiling at him. Episode 3 opens with this montage that's really playing with our expectations. We watch a flashback of 1 year ago, Peter Quince running around buying fancy clothes and alcohol and getting into this expensive car. The whole montage is set to Tainted Love, which might be on the nose, but I like it. And then we watch him go to his employer, Henry Wingrave, and hand over all this nice stuff he just bought, and suddenly our understanding of the scene is upended. Peter lives adjacent to all this luxury, but none of it is his own. He steps out of the office to bring in a candidate for the au pair position at Bly, and Rebecca Jessel is sitting outside, waiting to be interviewed.
I'm Peter Quint. I work with Pedretti.
Mr. Quint.
I love this little exchange in their first meeting about a stain on her shirt.
He will notice, you know.
Okay.
When she goes into the interview, Henry does indeed notice, and Rebecca replies,
The children are what? 7 and 9? I expect being precious about blouses won't serve me well.
And in the present, we see Danny and Hannah dealing with the appearance of Peter Quint. The police and Hannah explain that Peter stole a lot of money from Henry and then ran off. Oh, and I have to mention here, it's very refreshing to watch a horror property where other characters aren't constantly disbelieving and gaslighting the protagonist. After some initial doubt over the figure Danny saw in episode 1, Hannah and everybody back her up and believe her completely. This was an element in the novella as well, with Miss Gross believing the governess's story. In the show, Owen and Jamie help Hannah and Danny search the grounds. Everybody ends up spending the night, and the 4 adults stay up late trying to puzzle what's going on. Owen wonders if Peter knows that Rebecca is dead. He guesses that the mysterious calls they've been getting
Hello?
Hello?
are actually just Peter trying to get a hold of Rebecca. Also, this happens.
Well, Mrs. Grace, it is too late now. Come on. Tuck in and relax for a bit.
And that is so cute, I could just die. Danny and Jamie stay up a little longer talking about Peter and Rebecca. Jamie says their relationship was toxic.
The wrong kind of love can fuck you up. I saw how he twisted himself into her.
burrowed in deep.
She goes on to say that people mix up love and possession.
But guess what that means? He didn't just trap her, he trapped himself.
Foreshadowing says what? Anyways, everybody's a bit worried when Owen stays overnight because his mom is sick.
What about your mum? It's just for one night. She's already fast asleep.
Oh, it's only one day. I'm sure she can use a day without me.
Well, thank you for coming to our rescue.
Well, you always come to mine.
But still, Owen stays for the day, just to make sure everyone is okay. The flashbacks show us Rebecca Jessel starting as the au pair for the Wingraves.
Perfectly splendid.
The kids are a handful, but in the normal kid way.
Miss Jessel, he's cheating! You're lying, and that's cheating! It's not!
We also watch as her and Peter grow closer. He's quite charming initially, with brief moments of vulnerability and honesty that really seem to win her over. Of course, there are the warning signs too.
Please.
Patience.
Not to mention some truly nasty behavior.
I'm talking about that man you opened wide for not 2 hours ago.
He asked me to taste his batter.
Fuck!
In the present, the kids are acting pretty weird again, but it's all interrupted when they get a call that Owen's mother died. Hannah comforts Owen, whispering something in his ear before Owen gets in the car and drives home, and Hannah goes to light a candle for his mother in the little chapel on the grounds. Meanwhile, Danny thanks Jamie for staying, and this happens.
Who the hell knew?
And then after Jamie drives away, Danny turns and sees him again. The ghost she's been seeing more and more, the one whose hand appeared to her in her bed earlier in this episode. And that brings us to episode 4 and Edmund. Danny and her bespectacled childhood friend Edmund grew up together and eventually were engaged to be married. Danny was raised by a single mother who seemed a little distant, so Edmund's family was very much her family. We watch in flashbacks throughout the episode as everybody is preparing for this wedding, and Danny is noticeably lukewarm on the whole thing. Until finally, one night she tells Edmund that she can't marry him. In their car, she tries to explain how she thought eventually she would feel the way she was supposed to feel, and that she still loves him, but not in that way. And he takes this extremely badly.
It's just not.
Fuck you, Danielle. Why are you doing this to me?
Eddie.
No, let me go.
Eddie.
Let me go.
I'm sorry.
Jesus, have you not? You've done enough.
And he gets out of the car and gets hit by an oncoming truck. The headlights illuminate his glasses, and in this horrifying moment, we realize Danny's been seeing Edmund's ghost in the seconds before his accident. Or in the case of the hand in her bed, in the moments after it, as he lay there bloody on the street. In the present, we see everybody reacting to Owen's loss. Danny tells Jamie she can't really deal with funerals, so she stays home with Flora and Miles. At one point, Flora muses on how strange her own parents' funeral was. They died overseas, and back home they buried empty coffins. So Danny tells her,
You know, your parents loved you so much that in a way they'll always be here.
And Flora replies,
They're really not. I've looked and looked, but we can pretend. If that makes you feel better.
And she says this to try and comfort the older woman. Oh man, I can't with these weird kids, they are so precious. After the funeral, Owen actually comes over for dinner, where Flora continues to be alarmingly wise and poignant for her age as she talks to Owen about how she felt after her parents died.
It only felt like dying, because actually, I was still alive. You have to be to feel that way. But then I learned the secret. Dead doesn't mean gone.
And also, Miles is acting out, wanting to drink wine and shit. Danny ends up sending them both to bed to curb that behavior, which leads to this little bit that I love.
I do like that young woman.
Upstairs, Danny talks to Miles, and it's kind of a game-recognizing game moment. She says she gets why he's acting out, trying to act older than he is. She tells him that he's got a lot of good people in his life.
Miles, you've got some great grown-ups. Some great people here to choose for your family.
In the flashbacks, we then see Danny and Edmund's family at the hospital as they receive the news that Edmund didn't make it. And we see Edmund appear to her for the first time in the hospital bathroom. And then as he continues to haunt her at his own funeral.
Excuse me!
Before she leaves for England, his mother stops by to share condolences and to give her Edmund's glasses.
I can't stand to look at them. I couldn't bear to throw them away, so I thought, please.
Okay, of course.
In the present, Danny, Owen, Jamie, and Hannah break out the wine for a boozy bonfire. They all start to give toasts. Hannah toasts to Rebecca.
Whoever she is, she's still worth 10 of that man, I won't say his name.
Jamie toasts to the Wingrave parents.
They were good people, and their kids really miss them. Nothing can fix that.
And she toasts Danny.
She's a bit of a weirdo, but she's a lot stronger than she thinks. I'm glad she's here. I think they would be too.
And Owen gives a toast to his mother, Margaret Sharma. He talks about the difficulty of his mother not knowing who he was most of the time towards the end. He says he hates how the speech they gave at her burial smoothed over all the bad bits and made it nice, and how they left out all the good stuff too.
She had a sweet tooth and a dirty laugh, and she loved me so hard it hurt.
He says he misses her, that she was his anchor, and then his burden.
And soon I'll let her go too.
At some point in the evening, Jamie and Danny wander off, and Jamie asks Danny what's wrong, so Danny tells her about Edmund, about how he died, and the fact that she still sees him sometimes. And Jamie basically goes,
"Piss off, ghost!"
And then Danny kisses her, and... Seriously, Edmund, could you not? Meanwhile, Owen and Hannah talk about going to Paris.
Say it with me. Hannah Gross in Paris.
Then Jamie goes to drive Owen home.
Alcohol you later.
God, even for you.
She tells Danny that they're fine, and everything's fine. Later that night, Danny seems to have reached some kind of conclusion. She grabs the glasses off her bedside table like she's ready to do something. Then Flora and Miles hold her up in the hall with this story about a bad dream while this fuckery goes on behind her. I'm guessing she's the one who's been making those muddy footprints we've been seeing. Also, yikes. But anyway, once the ghost is gone and the kids are back in bed, Danny goes with a bottle of wine back to that bonfire. She throws the glasses in and watches them begin to melt when Edmund appears.
It's just you and me then.
So she sits and has a drink with her ghost, which I just love that a lot. But let's put a pin in that for now to talk about Henry James. Is there a reading list I should look into for Henry James? Like, I thought it was initially just The Turn of the Screw. What other stories should I be looking at?
You should look at The Romance of Certain Old Clothes. You should look at The Jolly Corner, The Beast in the Jungle. There's an interesting one called Sir Edmund Orme that we kind of pulled a little from. We named Danny's fiance after him. But for the most part, you're really well served by Turn of the Screw and Romance of Certain Old Clothes in particular.
So, The Haunting of Bly Manor isn't so much an adaptation of a single work by Henry James as it is a sort of Henry James mixtape. A Henry James greatest hits, if you will. Every episode of the season is named after one of Henry James' stories and has something in common with the short story it's named for. For example, the title of episode 4 comes from the short story The Way It Came, which tells the tale of a man who is jealous of the relationship between his fiancée and another woman. And the story Flanagan mentioned as Edmund's namesake, Sir Edmund Orme, is about a ghost who haunts a woman that rejected him. The Jolly Corner features a smiling doppelganger and a character who is haunted by regrets. The Beast in the Jungle features a character who is awaiting his eventual demise. This man has a relationship with a woman who he has told of what's coming, and the two sort of stay in each other's orbit, waiting for the end to come. And then there's The Turn of the Screw, which was published in 1898 and provides a lot of the overarching framework for the whole season. From the framing device, in the story, the narrator and several other acquaintances listen to a man named Douglas tell this story on Christmas Eve. Similarly to the show, the story is not from Douglas's own experience. In the novella, he's telling this story from a manuscript that was given to him by a former governess who is now dead. In the show, the job title was updated to au pair, or in more common terms, a nanny.
The nanny. Au pair.
But in the original novella, she was a governess. The novella also references a past failed romance between the governess Miss Jessel and the dastardly Peter Quint, who are both dead now. There's a Mrs. Gross, who is the kindly housekeeper, and even a few of the most iconic images from the story are in the show, such as the ghost smiling at the window, the ghost lady by the lake, and so on. Now, the novella's entire climax happens one night when Flora has been taken away to stay with her uncle by Mrs. Gross, because they believe she has been possessed by Miss Jessel. So the governess, alone with Miles, sees Peter Quint's ghost in the window and hugs Miles to try and shield him from the ghost, and she tells him he's free now. And when she lets him go, he collapses to the ground and she realizes he died in her arms. Which, most of that kind of happens at the end of episode 2. I'll also take a moment here to mention the 1961 adaptation of The Turn of the Screw called The Innocents. That's where all of these clips you're seeing are from. This adaptation is pretty beloved and was an admitted influence for Flanagan, most notably in the use of the O Willow Waly tune, which was written by George Arick and Paul Den for the film adaptation.
The O Willow Waly song from The Innocents seemed like a great way to go. And initially I thought we'd only use that kind of as the seed of the score.
The lyrics of the song are fairly simple. They say, "We lay, my love and I, beneath the weeping willow. But now alone I lie and weep beside the tree, singing, O Willow Waly, by that tree that weeps with me, singing, O Willow Waly, till my lover return to me. We lay, my love and I, beneath the weeping willow. A broken heart have I. O Willow I Die. O Willow I Die." And it's probably obvious, but the lyrics not only speak of death and lost love, but of nature, of a willow tree. I wonder if a certain gardener might vibe with these lyrics. Anyways, just like season 1, which took a lot of concepts and ideas from Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House to make a new story, season 2 does the same with the works of Henry James. Now, Henry James was an interesting dude. He lived from 1843 to 1916. He was born in New York City but spent most of his adult life in Europe, eventually becoming a British citizen a year before his death. He was a big proponent of the literary realism movement. He wrote a whole manifesto about it in 1885 called The Art of Fiction. In it, he spoke to the need for characters to drive story rather than plot. His works were sometimes criticized for being too psychological, and he tended to like writing stories about American transplants in Europe. Go figure. And not all of his works were spooky. Some were more about people navigating the society of their time and interpersonal drama, but the man did love him a ghost story. Many of them were considered ambiguous. The Turn of the Screw famously leaves it up to interpretation whether the governess's visions of specters are even real, and many of his works feature elements of Gothic literature, doomed romances, and wicked turns of fate and circumstance, which is something we see quite a lot of in Bly Manor.
There is this little wicked turn of ironic fate in particular. I think that one more emerged from the various writers as we went along. They seemed to get giddy about being able to pay off those connections in dark ways.
Like the dresses coveted by Perdita, which literally kill her, or the ghost haunting Danny being a vision of him seconds before his death. There are many cruel and ironic turns throughout the season that reflect that Gothic sensibility. Each one another turn of the screw. And with that, let's talk about Hannah Gross.
You had a Gross, Theo, 1987, you're at Bly. Miles is 10, Flora is 8. You're Hannah Gross. Hannah Gross.
In season 1, The Haunting of Hill House presented us with the idea that time for the dead is circular.
Our moments fall around us like rain. Or snow. Or confetti.
And in season 2, we find that time for the dead is almost recursive. We see moments repeating over and over again, whether the dead want it or not.
We talked a lot about memory. That kind of combined with our discussions about dementia, in particular in relation to Owen and his mother, kind of collided into this idea that we could do a dementia of the spirit.
Which brings us to episode 5, The Altar of the Dead, written by Angela Lamanna and directed by Liam Gavin. An episode that, much like the Bent Neck Lady episode in season 1, sort of upends all our expectations around this show and sets us barreling in a new direction we didn't quite expect. The episode begins with Owen and Hannah sitting by that bonfire. Owen muses on how he can't count on the past because memory is too unreliable.
That's what I learned taking care of Mum. It's kind of what dementia is, isn't it?
Hannah says he has a past and a future he can rely on, and Owen points out that Hannah spends most of her time caring for other people. He encourages her to get away from it all and go to Paris. Maybe both of them could go to Paris.
Say it with me. Hannah Gross in Paris.
What would I do in Paris?
Live, you and me, while we still can.
And then Jamie comes and interrupts this moment to take Owen home.
Alcohol you later.
God, good for you.
And from there, the episode progresses into a series of flashbacks. We see Hannah and Owen's first meeting, when he interviewed to be the cook at Bly.
In Paris, I was a sous chef, which means they only let me chop vegetables.
We see scenes from before the Wingrave parents died. Hannah seemed to get along really well with the mother, Charlotte Wingrave. We also see that Hannah often clashed with Peter Quint, because he was pretty
And what am I up to?
No, you're taking things that aren't yours. I'll have the necklace, please.
Here.
Thank you.
that. And we see scenes of Hannah stumbling onto Peter and Rebecca's burgeoning relationship, which she clearly didn't approve of. We also find out Hannah was married at one point, and her husband left her quite suddenly. At Charlotte's suggestion, she lights a candle for him in the church.
That's for Sam. He may not be dead, but nobody's perfect, are they?
I don't think you lit remembrance candles for the living.
Oh, you don't normally. But for him, a special case.
And the other thing we see is several scenes of Miles being a creepy and vindictive little shit.
Don't ever do that again, do you hear me?
Look at you, all flushed. You're pretty when you blush.
And some of these scenes keep repeating. This interview between Hannah and Owen keeps coming back, but something is wrong. The scene keeps twisting from the inside. Something keeps pushing it off track. Both characters keep reacting to the strangeness, which isn't normally how memories or flashbacks work, but...
Something is wrong with Miles.
Also, there's this one scene I want to point out for, foreshadowing reasons. It's when Rebecca is still alive and Hannah tells Owen about an old gardener's trick for dealing with mice using glue traps. One day she found one of those traps with just a mouse's leg stuck to it. The mouse had chewed its own leg off to escape and then bled out a few feet away. She says Peter is a glue trap, and Rebecca is the one stuck in it. Then at one point, Hannah stumbles into a memory that isn't even hers, of a night when Peter told Rebecca to get ready to run away with him to America.
This is one of my favorites. He's so much himself in this one. What are you doing here? How did you slip into my...
I'm so sorry.
And utterly alarmed by the strangeness of it all, Hannah runs out into the hall in time to see Peter telling Flora and Miles to go back to bed, and then this happens. This faceless woman grabs Peter by the neck and drags him down the hall. And then suddenly Peter is back and a little confused about why Miles and Flora are looking at him weird, the reason of course being that he's dead. Which he finally realizes when the faceless woman comes back around to drag Peter's body down the stairs.
Stop! Stop, let me go.
And then this happens.
Let me go! Let me go!
You bitch! Let me go!
In this moment, Peter somehow possesses Miles, which is when it's made abundantly clear that a lot of the creepy adult behavior we've been seeing from Miles was indeed Peter all along. Meanwhile, this woman drags his body into the lake, leaving nothing but a trail of muddy footprints to illustrate her nightly path. And given the violent tendencies of the spirit, we can now explain some of Flora and Miles' behavior, locking Danny in the closet, and also this scene.
And it knew my name, and it said it wanted to do awful things. And it had bones for hands.
We're all just these kids trying to keep her safe from the Lady of the Lake. After this, we get another go-round of that interview between Hannah and Owen.
In Paris, I was a sous chef, so I only cut vegetables. But here I'll be putting everything together myself. It'll be a great learning experience.
Again?
Yes, apparently we're doing this again.
Why?
You tell me.
Hannah tries to play it off as normal.
I'm sorry, I'm having a difficult time. Owen, is it?
And she tries to recall her dream, the scene she was just in.
I'm having the strangest of dreams.
Because for some reason, it seems she's just tripping from memory to memory. So Owen recites a little Shakespeare.
To sleep her chance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. What dreams?
And then she manages to piece together a little of the memories she just saw, but it's not enough.
Not yet, huh? Needs to cook a little longer, I think.
And Owen reiterates the facts with her.
You are Hannah Gross. The year is 1987. You're at Bly. Dominic is dead. Charlotte is dead. Rebecca is dead.
And he tells her that something is wrong with Miles. And from there we flip to Miles and Peter Quint standing at the edge of this well, but it's after Peter disappeared, so Hannah comes running and says she'll call the police. And then Peter sort of switches into Miles as they talk, which is super creepy.
For fuck's sake, woman!
Peter, as Miles, says he would love to be dragged away by the police, to be dragged off this property, but he can't.
You can't.
Because?
You're dead.
And then he shoves Hannah into the well, where she falls to her death. And that crack that she's been seeing on the walls of Bly is a crack in the stone at the bottom of the well. And now we realize that the ghost of Hannah was staring down at her own body as Danny arrived for her first stay at Bly Manor. And before all that horror can sink in, we're back to the bonfire, back to Owen and Hannah dreaming of going to Paris.
You and me. While we still can.
And Hannah says yes. She says yes to going to Paris, to being with Owen, to all of it. But nobody hears her.
I'll call you later.
Wait.
The memory continues like she'd said nothing at all.
Please?
It's all good.
Owen walks away and Hannah calls after him. She runs to try and follow him, but they don't stop walking. And they don't hear her calls. And so Hannah is alone at the edge of a memory, grasping at what few certainties she has.
You had a gross to years 1987. You're at Bly. Miles is 10, floor is 8. You're Hannah Gross. Hannah Gross.
Hey kids, y'all want to get aboard this pain train to Sad Town? Choo-choo, motherfucker!
I think it was 2 days that they ended up running the various versions of that scene, and they'll both tell you it drove them crazy. Rahul can, if you just point at him and say go, he can do that whole, I was in Paris studying to be a sous chef. He can do the whole thing. And they just did it over and over and over again. And I'm told it felt very purgatorial.
That interview sequence over its various iterations is such a powerhouse performance from both Tania Miller and Rahul Kohli. Hannah's increasing confusion and Owen's increasingly strange behavior creates such an engaging and unsettling series of scenes because Hannah doesn't understand what's happening. And this recreation of Owen in her memory knows more than she does, like her subconscious trying to get through to her. And when Flanagan talked about dementia of the spirit, Hannah Gross is one of those spirits. Throughout the season, various characters muse on what it must be like to wear away piece by piece.
Losing yourself like that, being worn away a little bit every day. Just shoot me. Put me out of my misery. It's not fair on anyone.
And that is what we see happening to Hannah in real time. Her story feels like the eroding of a mind from the inside. She wanders from memory to memory, quickly forgetting where and when she once was and getting fully absorbed in the moment she's in. But then she's pulled away into another memory and another time, losing what little context she had for the moment she was just in. And there's plenty more to discuss here with these tucked away memories and fading ghosts, but I want to put that on hold and talk about what a showrunner does.
Well, I learned a lot about being a showrunner on this show. While I wasn't in the director's chair for a lot of these things, a lot of my work went into working with the directors ahead of time in prep and making sure that We had a set of rules that we call a style guide, that things they can and can't do to make sure that the show is consistent and that it doesn't feel abruptly, violently transitioning between different points of view and tones as it goes.
So, as I mentioned before, Mike Flanagan was the showrunner for Bly Manor. On Hill House, he was one of several executive producers, but he had writing credits on 4 of the 10 episodes and directed all of them. And he said in several interviews at the time that being involved with the writing and directing of 10 episodes was kind of wearying, so this season he took more of an overseer role as showrunner. And what does a showrunner do? I mean, the term is a little nebulous, since a showrunner on an American show is usually credited as executive producer, and Flanagan is one of 5 credited executive producers. I probably should have asked him about that, but oh well. In an article from nofilmschool.com, the job is described as part god, accountant, hostage negotiator, and writer. In basic terms, a showrunner oversees the direction of a television show, from the writing to the cast and crew to keeping an eye on the budget. While individual episodes might have their own directors, the idea is that the whole show will adhere to a singular, cohesive vision. And you've probably heard of a few showrunners like Phoebe Waller-Bridge on Killing Eve, Aaron Sorkin on West Wing, and Russell T. Davies, Stephen Moffat, and Chris Chibnall have all taken turns showrunning on Doctor Who. In our interview, Flanagan was quick to lay plenty of credit at the feet of his directors and writers.
The script for episode 5 was something we all worked very hard on, and I worked very closely with Angela Lamanna, who penned the teleplay. We outlined it together with the whole room. All of us broke it scene by scene, and then by the time she went off to write the draft, there was kind of no daylight between any of us. Everybody was on the same page.
Flanagan himself wasn't even on set for my favorite episode, The Altar of the Dead.
I was traveling when they shot that, so I was checking in via text with Adam Fasulo, who oversees our productions for Intrepid when we're not on set, and with Liam and with Rahul, and just checking, and Tania, seeing how it was going.
But his vision still permeates the show. Director Liam Gavin said on the Evolution of Horror podcast that he had a brief for what the show was, and he worked to that brief. Overall, Flanagan said he chose directors who had directed independent horror films that prioritize character, like Liam Gavin's A Dark Song or Yolanda Ramke and Ben Howling's aforementioned film Cargo.
Oh, want to talk about split diopters? I only spotted them in the first episode, but was that just like, we can't do long takes this season? Split diopter fun.
Split diopters, yes. I love a split diopter. I love it. And I think the last TV show that really consistently leaned into it was 6 Feet Under, and they used it so beautifully.
A split diopter, as you might guess from its name, splits the focus of a shot. A piece of convex glass covers half the lens, allowing a shot to have 2 different depths of field and focus. Usually the giveaway will be a slight blurring at the center of the frame. It's been used in loads of films and TV shows to various effects, and in Bly, it was frequently used to highlight empty space. In both of these scenes, the children are acting particularly odd due to the presence of ghosts that Danny can't see or communicate with. The spot over her shoulder that's in focus, that's where the ghost is.
The diopter is there to also throw focus to the person who's invisible, who's there and who should be there but isn't. And they're like, so what am I focusing on? And it's like literally the air over this mark where Miss Jessel would be if Danny could see her and we could see her, but we can't see her. And so it got very complicated building these split diopter shots that were really, the one in the bathroom is my favorite when she turns and looks over her shoulder, because we went through a ton of effort to use this piece of equipment to highlight empty space.
Also, there's this split diopter where if the other shot's focused on where a ghost would be, this time the ghost is visible and in focus. Man, I'm sad. Another major factor in this season was the editing, particularly in episode 5. Now, a lot of the editing that you might really notice is in the interview scenes. There's some editing that feels like it's deliberately fucking with continuity and our understanding of a simple shot reverse shot to unsettle an audience and submerge us in the surreal unreality of these scenes, which is so incredibly good. But the technique I spotted a lot in episode 5 in particular was match cutting. Match cutting basically means connecting 2 scenes visually rather than just casually transitioning from one scene into the next with a wide establishing shot. It can be a hard cut between 2 shots that have enough visual similarity to create a kind of symmetry. It can be done with sound, with a piece of overlapping audio bridging 2 scenes. Or you can cut on movement. I would say most of the edits in this episode are cuts based on movements or visual symmetry. Like, here's a bit of visual symmetry. And by the way, all the Haunting shows love to transition in and out of a flashback with the door, and I like it every time. It's neat. And several flashbacks use a more movement-based match cut, like Hannah turning her head or even just closing and opening her eyes. It's so seamless, and to build an entire episode like this really adds to the sort of dreamlike quality of it. And when it comes to criticism about the show, I might be a little biased, not only because the creator was kind enough to talk to me about it, but because I liked season 1 so much. And I like stories that highlight queer relationships, and I like a narrative that fucks with chronology, and sad stories that have lots of catharsis, so there's a lot here in Bly Manor that's my jam. Overall, my biggest critique is probably just with the pacing. I don't mind being patient, but episodes 2 and 3 did require me to sometimes take a breath and be like, alright, let's see where this is going. Or when 2 episodes in a row ended on this cliffhanger, I was a little bit like, I would like to get off of this cliff now, Michael. But that's really it. The show required a little patience, and I think rewarded it in the end, so, I'm cool with that. A criticism I've heard a lot is that Bly Manor is boring or less scary than Hill House, and I'm probably a bad person to talk to about that because my answer is cool, awesome, much appreciated, thank you very much. I don't mind a bit of dread or suspense, but there's certain kinds of graphic or disturbing imagery that I find really upsetting. This is the reason I'm not watching Hereditary. Like, stop asking me. I might watch Midsommar, but that's a big if, friends.
I got a lot of flack for saying that I thought Bly Manor was scarier than Hill House, and I do, but not because it has way less scares.
It's a horrifying concept. It's very upsetting.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought was that, this version of the afterlife and this version of the ghosts in this story scared me a lot more than the ones who were just kind of hanging out forever.
I mean, this is a bit of personal taste, but I'm down for a horror TV show that presents horrifying concepts rather than one that shows like, I don't know, a girl ripping her face off or turning inside out or some shit. I'm cool with engaging on this level, where the horror is quiet and conceptual. I don't know. All I know is this one scene made me throw my headphones across the room. And I had to pause the show and take a walk after this scene. So, I don't know. I guess it's up to you to decide if that's scary enough for you. But I do want to address the criticism that this show utilizes the trope of burying your gaze. And quick spoiler alert for these pieces of media. Skip ahead to the timecode on screen if you must. So I can understand if queer people yearning for some decent representation are a little sensitive to this issue. And if watching one half of a lesbian couple die is too much for you, I get it. But I really don't think this is an example of burying your gaze. Without going too deep on it, I would say most examples of this trope treat LGBT characters as expendable, or they die in some way because of their gayness. Like AIDS and hate crimes and so on. And Bly Manor does neither of those things. Like, it's okay if you feel too sensitive to watch a happily committed gay couple get broken up with a character death, but I don't think every gay character who dies is an example of this harmful trope. And if you want more on this in relation to Bly Manor, I've got a link in the description for Rowan Ellis's excellent review, which went further in depth on the trope. Her whole channel talks a lot about the history of queer cinema, so go check her out. I did ask Mike Flanagan if Victoria Pedretti could ever be happy on the show, and this was his answer.
And we all really believed that we were creating a happy ending. And then that we see on social, it's just like, devastated.
I mean, listen, I saw
enraged. Yeah. It's like, I get these emails. It's like, you have to pay my therapy. And it's like, I thought we were doing, this was the happy, oh shit, I don't know what a happy ending is.
And with that, let's talk about some doppelgangers and dead people.
So everybody's haunted by something in the show. Like Hannah has the crack in the wall, Danny has her ex-boyfriend. What was it about Uncle Henry that made his demon so personal?
What I loved about Henry was that there are decisions we're capable of making that I think are so damaging. And the idea of him having an affair with his sister-in-law, it's one of those things you hear about happening, or you know people who have been through something like this. And my question is always like, how do you come back from that? You know, how does a family come back from that?
So, episode 6, The Jolly Corner, finally clues us in to what Henry Wingrave has been doing this whole time. Dani has tried to get in touch with him a few times about his niece and nephew, and during this episode she tries a few more times and is constantly told that he's busy. It turns out what he's busy doing is locking himself in his office and drinking himself into oblivion while he's racked with guilt and haunted by a doppelganger of himself that won't stop smiling. So he spends all this time alone with himself and his guilt in human form. It's like a form of self-flagellation, or self-immolation.
The short story that Henry James wrote called The Jolly Corner has this really, really cool hook where a guy comes home and there's this doppelganger of himself there, but who's just evil, who just has this horrible grin and he's missing fingers, which we stayed away from because that was just too confusing. But that idea of being haunted by yourself was something I thought was really fun, that if the people who could have forgiven him or even hated him for what he did weren't there anymore, if he didn't have his sister-in-law to pine over for their lost love, and he didn't have his brother to hate him for what he did, he's left in a profound aloneness where he really only has him.
Over the course of this episode, we learn that Henry was having an affair with his sister-in-law, Charlotte, before she died, and that his brother found out about it. The trip they took that ended in their unfortunate demise was actually an attempt to get away from Henry and rekindle their marriage.
I can fix it.
But before they left, his brother Dominic gave Henry a piece of his mind, and it honestly feels like he's laying a curse on his brother here as he delivers this speech about Henry being banished from the family to be alone with his true self.
And he's a shit grinning fucking monster.
The scene where Henry meets his other half for the first time is truly harrowing as he receives the news that Dominic and Charlotte are dead, and the doppelganger appears to him, smiling demonically and holding out his hand to say hello. One other detail we figure out is that Flora is actually Henry's daughter from the affair with Charlotte.
Math didn't work, did it? She didn't tell you. Oh, look at that. I get to be here when the penny drops.
And the crank calls that the house has been getting are actually Henry calling. He's too scared to say it's him, but he's just calling in the hopes that he might hear his daughter's voice.
Hello? Hello?
It's another freaking prank call.
And it's profoundly sad to see how this whole family came apart, partly due to his mistakes. And he knows that all too well, which feels like some of the reason he is continuing to keep himself in this self-imposed captivity. But at the end of this episode, Henry finally says fuck it. He says,
I have a bad feeling about this,
and heads to Bly Manor. And for the first time, his doppelganger stops smiling. But hang on to that thread, it's gonna be a while before we pick it back up. The other half of episode 6 shows us that Flora isn't doing great. She keeps getting tucked away.
I've been tucked away again in another memory.
You have.
This is happening more and more, isn't it?
It is.
Which means she's kind of getting possessed by Rebecca Jessel, and so Dani just finds her wandering around outside or collapsing for no reason. And when she gets tucked away by Rebecca, her consciousness sort of ends up in a memory, like Hannah in episode 5. Mostly sweeter memories from her childhood when her parents were still around. But there are several flashbacks devoted to the time she saw a faceless little boy in her room and went to get her mom and found Charlotte and Uncle Henry together.
Uncle Henry?
Hello, Flora.
Uncle Henry slept over.
The two go to investigate Flora's ghost, and Henry tells her that he had an imaginary friend when he was young too.
He was a soldier, and I was very afraid of him until I gave him a story.
And at this point, everybody in the audience goes, "Hey Henry, I think you saw a ghost!" Also, in the present, Dani is trying really hard to woo Jamie with the coffee she's bad at making to try and smooth over this whole bit. And it's adorable.
Poppins, you flirt.
Eventually it works enough for Jamie to relent and spend the evening with Dani. They go out to the garden where Jamie talks about her difficult life growing up, about her mom who was too young to be raising 3 kids, and her dad who worked himself into a slow death in a dank, dark coal mine, while her mother cheated on him and eventually left. And then social services came and split up her and her siblings and sent them all to foster care, which Jamie describes as
just a bunch of stale, perverted men with bitter wives, hoping to make a few quid by taking care of the local trash.
She says she even spent some time in jail, and that's where she got into gardening, because plants are easier than people, and plants can often reward a lot of love and effort with a little beauty and light, even if it's a lot of work for a flower that will only last a night. It's a gorgeous scene, and then they kiss, and we all go, yeah! Later on, Danny asks Jamie to spend the night because she's got a bad feeling, and Jamie says there'll be other nights, and they have time. So Jamie goes home, and Danny checks on Flora to find, oh shit, that's a ghost!
Flora? Come here.
It's okay. It's only Miss Jessel.
And then she starts calling for Miles, and
Well, this is awkward.
Flora goes running upstairs, and Danny runs after her.
Flora, we gotta go. Come on.
I'm sorry.
And gets knocked out by Miles. So, that's just, fine, it's fine. In episode 7, The Two Faces Part 2, Danny spends the bulk of the episode trying to non-verbally reason with two ghosts and the children who are either being possessed by them or misled by them, depending on the scene. Peter keeps telling the children that everything is fine and this is all part of the plan. They're going to teach Danny how to be tucked away, and won't that be nice? Of course, one notable bit is that both ghosts seem to get randomly distracted by sounds the living people in the room can't hear. Eventually, they just sort of drift back into memories, getting tucked away again, as it were.
Bex, just stop and stay with me, Bex!
For Peter, it's this knocking on the door that leads to a scene with his mom.
No. That's what you say to me all this time. That's what you see.
It doesn't seem like these two get along great. She basically showed up at his door to try and blackmail him for money, which might explain a plan to steal a bunch of money and run away to America. Then we switch to Rebecca, reacting to Peter's disappearance with shock and upset. But after some time passes, Peter is able to appear to her and explain that he died. And he can't leave the grounds. His soul is trapped here. They try to leave Bly together, with Peter possessing Rebecca's body, but they're both trapped now, in one way or another. When Peter finally comes to her again, he has a plan, a way for them to be together again, and it's a permanent solution. The first step is for him to possess Rebecca again. They have a phrase now to expedite the process.
It's you. It's me. It's us.
And while Peter is in control of her body, Rebecca gets tucked away in nice memories of her and Peter together. Meanwhile, Peter walks Rebecca into the lake and drowns her. The next morning, Flora finds her body floating in the water and her ghost sobbing on the shore. Rebecca is understandably furious with Peter.
Son of a bitch! You fucking lied! You're a fucking liar!
I had to. No! I'm sorry, but I had to.
The situation is so messed up on so many levels, and he was too much of a coward to even stick around for the fallout. She suffered the pain of her death alone. And before he can begin to explain his fucked up reasoning, before he can explain what happens to ghosts at Bly, he's pulled away again.
Again, we have to do this. I was in the middle of something important.
I doubt that.
And it's here we learn this is the only memory that Peter ever gets tucked away in. Even Rebecca gets to revisit better moments she had with Peter, and the kids get to see their parents again, but for Peter, this is all there is. He says it could be worse. He could be trapped in a memory from his childhood, a memory of his father.
And then I started to realize why this was worse than that, why this was hell. I was a kid back then.
He says that what his father did to him as a child, he was too young to understand, but he was an adult when this happened. He's old enough to understand that his mother stood by and did nothing to stop his father, and now she's here to ruin his life more.
But here, this time, well, I know better, don't I? This time, seeing you in that fucking doorway.
He says that he hopes that she knows. He hopes that she knows that this blackmail is what ended up killing her son, and she replies,
Honey, I don't even know that you're dead.
In the present, Peter and Rebecca are back, convincing the kids that this is fine, everything's fine. When Rebecca expresses reservations about the plan, Peter reminds her of what happens to ghosts at Bly.
This is what happened, Miles Flora. You don't want that to happen, Dusty.
And so we learn the plan is to possess the children permanently. Peter sells it to them as a forever home, where they can be with their parents forever. All the while, Danny is just on the floor, expressing her terror and objections to all of this, but eventually the kids agree and they utter that same phrase.
It's you. It's me.
It's us.
And collapse to the ground. When they both get up, Miles's eyes are 2 different colors, and he says he'll take care of Hannah while Rebecca deals with Danny. And by taking care of Hannah, Peter means bringing her back to the well where her body is to remind her that she's super dead. Apparently, Hannah's continued presence at Bly, her ability to interact with physical space, and even have different outfits has to do with her ghost's denial of the fact that she died. And Peter wants to put a stop to that so she won't interfere with their plans. And suddenly we get another flash of that interview memory from Hannah's perspective. It's only here, with Owen, that the full weight of it finally sinks in.
Because I'm dead. Oh, God.
But in the present, there's Flora, who's supposed to deal with Danny. As Flora approaches, the older woman is freaking out, but...
How did I do?
You did very well.
It turns out Rebecca and Flora only went through the motions. Rebecca isn't possessing Flora for some harebrained scheme for freedom. And as Flora unties Danny, Flora and Rebecca have this exchange.
And I thought you needed my help.
No, Flora. No one should ever need that much help. Not from anyone else.
And she tells Danny that it's too late for Miles, but there's still a chance for Flora, that Danny just needs to take her and run. But as they're leaving the grounds, Flora realizes they're leaving Miles behind and she panics, not wanting to leave her brother. Danny desperately tries to reason with her, but then this happens. Well, shit. One thing Mike Flanagan talked about was the idea of heaven and hell. This idea that hell could be reliving your worst memories over and over again, and heaven could be reuniting with lost loved ones.
It started, I think, with Peter Quint, with that idea that he would just be trapped in the same moment again and again.
For Peter, who lived a life where he harmed others and never grew as a person, he lives in the hell that is this one horrifying memory.
Whereas kind of the characters who had tried to make an effort to make the world a little better around them and who had learned how to love people in a way that he never really did, that they would have more variety in the moments that they would revisit. And they could go to some that were their favorites, or they would be trapped in others that really represented a reunion with a lost loved one.
The one thing I find particularly fascinating is the handling of Peter Quint in this show.
Ollie in particular, he had a lot to say about Peter's backstory, and a lot of the things that come out in episode 7, the scene with him and his mom, a lot of the content of that scene are things Ollie pitched. And in particular, his abusive father and kind of some of the hints he wanted to make at that. That a lot came from Ollie directly as something he wanted to try to infuse the character with.
Flanagan talked about how both Oliver Jackson-Cohen and Tahira Sharif agreed that if Peter was an irredeemable shithead, it would lessen Rebecca's character to be so taken in by him. There needed to be something underneath all that toxic bullshit that was real, and possibly even lovable. But the show never excuses his behavior. We see, particularly through Rebecca, the kind of harm he's doing by being this selfish. Not to mention the fact that his big, awesome, radical plan for escaping Bly involves using literal children, and it was Peter who murdered Hannah. He just used Miles to do it. So, yes, Peter had a horrific, traumatizing childhood, and that may explain his behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. I really love when Rebecca tells Flora that nobody needs that much help, because there's a difference between helping somebody and being manipulated by them. I just love that the show allows us to understand this toxic, broken man and then draws this line in the sand because nobody needs that much help. And now it's time to talk about episode 8.
It's like when you work on a story about ghosts, you're always stuck on rules. And
oh yeah, ghost physics.
Yes, which change radically, and there's kind of no guidebook to carry through, and who gets to be a ghost and who doesn't get to be a ghost. We joke about why does one ghost get to make a haunted videotape that murders everyone, but their victims don't get to make their own tapes, and where's the cutoff at which point you're no longer kind of qualified to be a ghost in one of these stories?
So, a question that plagued the writers was, why are the ghosts happening? They wanted some reasoning behind it, an explanation for what I like to call ghost physics. Apparently, back in season 1, they had hoped to explore more of the history of Hill House, but they weren't able to. And that brings us to episode 8 and Viola Willoughby Lloyd. After a little previously on Bly Manor, we jump to the middle of the 17th century and the 2 daughters of a widowed gentleman the narrator names Mr. Willoughby. The younger daughter is named Perdita, and the older is named Viola, and their father has just died. Consequently, many an eligible bachelor shows up to try and charm and marry one or both of the sisters, thereby acquiring the father's wealth and estate. But the sisters know them to be vultures, so they devise a plan and invite a distant cousin, Arthur Lloyd, to the manor. Perdita entertains him, but the plan is for him to marry Viola. Unfortunately, Perdita is instantly charmed by this man, but she holds to her promise and lets her sister work her magic. The two are quickly married and have a child, Isabel, all while Perdita remains the dutiful sister. During their marriage, Viola is extravagant with their money, buying herself all kinds of elegant dresses and finery, and then one day, Viola gets some mystery illness, one that doctors say is incurable and highly contagious. So the doctor orders that her husband and young child be kept away for their own safety, and they do everything they can to cure her. But eventually, her own husband calls the priest to perform last rites. But Viola refuses to partake, remaining silent when the priest tells her to repeat his words.
Tell your God that I do not go.
Arthur entreats her to care for her soul now, since her body is too far gone, and of all people, it's Perdita who agrees with her.
You tell them, sister. You tell this priest and the God he fawns upon. You tell them no.
And Arthur says that God would want her to be pure, but Perdita says God should know better because she is how he made her.
She says she will not go, she will not.
And it almost feels like a spell the two of them are casting here. With this solidarity and defiance of the God that is known to them, it feels like they're setting something larger in motion. Because Viola lives. But she's not better. She's still sickly. They still keep her apart from her husband and child for fear that she might spread her sickness, and years pass like this. Over time, Viola grows bitter and hateful towards the only person she gets to see every day, her own sister Perdita. She imagines an affair between Perdita and Arthur and punishes her sister for it. And then she spends her nights walking the halls of Bly, singing "O Willow Waly," and coming to find her daughter and husband asleep in their bed. And the years pass by until one day she takes all her dresses and jewels and puts them in this chest. Again, it feels like a spell being laid as she drops in rose petals and entreats Arthur to keep all of it for their daughter when she comes of age. She says it will be a gift for her daughter, a bit of herself she can bequeath to her. And Arthur promises to keep the chest for Isabel. Meanwhile, this living purgatory is starting to get to Perdita. She tries to talk to Viola, basically telling her to give in.
But I feel better today. You say that every day and you look worse and worse and worse.
But Viola is bitter and angry, still imagining that Perdita has designs on Arthur, which, at this point, she might. The narrator tells us that a thought had occurred to Perdita over the last year she spent with Viola. The thought is mercy, although in truth it might have simply been enough. And when Arthur comes back from his business ventures, his wife is now dead, After an appropriate mourning period, Perdita and Arthur have a quiet, unceremonious wedding in the chapel on the grounds. And then over time we learn that Arthur is bad at business, and Bly Manor is losing all its wealth to the point that they may not be able to live in it soon. And also, Perdita has been unable to have a child of her own. So one day she tells Arthur they should open up that chest and sell all the gowns and jewels so they can hold on to their home. Arthur says no because he promised Viola, which Perdita takes very badly. Eventually, she decides to take matters into her own hands and goes to open up the chest and, well... From there, we jump back to Viola. She wakes up in this strange version of her bedroom, with blackened windows that are shut tight and doors that won't open. But the wardrobe is there with all her gowns, and that's it. Viola knows that one day she'll be with her daughter again, so she waits. She sleeps, she walks, and she waits. And after an age, the door to the room opens and Viola is overjoyed, expecting to see Isabel, but instead she sees Perdita. And, well, you know what comes next. Even with her sister dead, Viola is still locked away in the chest, waiting for Isabel. Meanwhile, Arthur has come to believe the chest is cursed and wants it nowhere near his daughter, so they leave Bly, moving to a more modest home, and they throw the chest to the bottom of the lake. And from Viola's perspective, this is the final betrayal. She's been abandoned. She's alone, without her husband, without her daughter. So time passes, and every night her ghost walks out of the lake and goes down her nightly path to the bedroom where her daughter once slept, only to find the bed empty. We see more time pass, and Viola begins to fade. She distills down to one emotion: rage. While she never goes looking for more victims, any adult that falls in her path is murdered, and any child is picked up and carried into the lake where they drown. But Viola's rage and stubbornness, her loneliness even, is so complete, it creates a gravity well, a glue trap, one could say. And all of the ghosts are stuck in her orbit, unable to leave the manor. Over time, Viola fades further, and one by one, the other ghosts follow her down this path to nothing. And now we're back in the present, to the scene so nice we played it thrice. And that's episode 8.
That idea of ghosts being kind of these residual images of people that would fade over time like a photograph would or like a memory would, that was something that gave us a new rule that most of us in the writer's room hadn't really played with before or run into before.
Yeah.
There's only so many ways you can kind of make someone stand there and go in the background, and by the 20th episode you're trying to write of it, it just gets really boring. So this seemed thematically resonant, and it seemed like something we could play with.
So the idea behind this whole concept, the way the ghosts turn into these empty, faceless creatures, came from the same ideas about dementia. It came from the same idea of fading away a piece at a time, which I honestly think is fascinating. And if you're familiar with Henry James's short story of the same name, you'll know that this is a pretty faithful adaptation up until Perdita's death, although a few names and details were moved around. And some of the narration we get in this episode is lifted verbatim from the story.
They were married, as was becoming, with great privacy, almost with secrecy.
Oh, and also, in this episode, Kate Siegel played the Lady of the Lake, but in the rest of the season, she was played by stuntwoman Daniela Dibb, which makes sense because can you imagine the biceps this woman must have to drag all these folk around? Although, according to Flanagan, they did have some special rigs and harnesses to keep the actors safe during these scenes, but a portion of it was done by Oliver Jackson-Cohen and Victoria Pedretti. Oh, and did you recognize Perdita? That's Katie Parker. She played Poppy Hill in season 1, and you might have spotted her in a few other Flanagan films. And with all that being said, let's talk about the beast in the jungle. Episode 9, The Beast in the Jungle, actually begins with Hannah, tucked away in that memory with Owen as she reiterates her new reality.
I'm dead.
Yes.
She says she can feel herself slipping away, and she doesn't want to fade.
I know, love.
And she reminisces about what it was like to meet Owen for the first time, how charming she found him, the future she had sometimes imagined for them.
I loved you, Owen. I should have told you.
What a life we could have had.
She says she wants to stay here, in this memory, and Owen reminds her that the real Owen is out there, and he might be in danger. Hannah needs to warn him, even if that means leaving the safety of this memory.
This isn't me. This is just you.
And in this very bittersweet moment, her memory of Owen comforts her.
You have loved me, so I'll always be here.
Hannah says she doesn't know where she'll go if she leaves, and Owen tells her to be brave in death. In the present, Danny is getting dragged by Viola. Hannah tries to stop her, but it doesn't work. Viola drags Danny all the way up to her child's former bedroom, where Flora has the idea that saves her. She jumps up on the bed, distracting Viola from Danny, who is barely conscious at this point. She drops the woman and picks up the child, carrying her back downstairs to the lake, just like she did with that little boy many years ago. And at this point, Henry shows up. Remember when he finally left his office a while back? Well, he's here now. It took him 3 episodes to get here, and he's gonna save his daughter. Ah, shit. Is he dead? Oh, well, there's no time to sweat that, because Owen and Jamie are here, too.
Oh, no. What are you doing here?
This is going to sound insane, but we both had an awful dream and we just drove and...
Hannah sort of gathers her composure and tells them.
They need you at the lake.
And then she disappears. And now it's time for Rebecca Jessel to break my goddamn heart again. Because she's following Flora and Viola into the lake. And Flora is scared and screaming, and Rebecca tries to soothe her. She says not to worry, and she won't feel a thing.
I'll feel it for you. I'll just tuck you away one last time. Go ahead, love. You let me handle this part.
Because once again, Rebecca has learned from Peter's brutality, and she's doing everything she can to protect these kids, and I'm gonna cry. Flora agrees and says the magic words, and Rebecca sends her to a memory of her mother. Meanwhile, Jamie and Owen find Henry on the ground, and Owen tries to resuscitate him while Jamie runs for the lake, but Danny beats her there. It's Danny who runs headlong after them, and she can't stop Viola, but the narrator tells us her next words were not something she understood, but something she felt.
It's you! It's me! It's us!
She says these words, not to Flora, but to Viola. And it works. In that moment, the spell on Bly Manor is lifted. The gravity of Viola's spirit that trapped all the ghosts here is finally gone.
Do you feel that?
Hannah and Henry are off to the side, watching Owen try to resuscitate Henry's body, and Hannah asks Henry to pass on a message for Owen, to tell him that she's sorry and that she loved him.
And the rest, well, it's just...
We don't get to hear the rest because Henry wakes up. He's alive again, and Hannah's gone.
And we had a big one there where it was like the last thing Hannah says should be confetti. And it took us until the last draft to say, no, she should not make it. She should make it right up to the word confetti and then disappear before she gets to say it.
And that's gorgeous. And I'm sad. We also get to see Miles waking up as himself, and Peter's ghost tells Miles that he's sorry, which, like, cool, good. He should say sorry to a lot of people, but this is a good moment for both characters. Meanwhile, at the lake, Danny's got Flora now, and she's pretty freaked out as Jamie gets there. Also, her eyes are 2 different colors now. And everybody that's still with us gets a moment to recover. Owen and Jamie hold Danny between them, and Henry gets to hug his daughter and nephew.
I'm so sorry, kids.
Owen asks where Hannah is, and we see Owen finding her body in the well. and the voiceover tells us everyone assumes she fell, and it was labeled as an unfortunate accident. But Owen stayed with her until she was properly laid to rest, and he loved her the whole way. We watch him light a candle for her in the chapel, and I started crying here, and pretty much didn't stop for the rest of the episode. So have fun with that knowledge. There's a lovely little scene of Henry with the kids. They're clearly packing to leave Bly Manor. He teaches Miles how to tie a bow tie, a trick he learned from Dominic, along with how to sew patches into his clothes. Flora and Miles ask if there are more stories, more he can teach them and tell them about their parents, and he says he'll tell them everything he knows. And then we get this scene with Danny as Jamie comes to check how she's doing with her own packing up, and just like every other time, she can tell that something's wrong, so she asks what it is, and Danny tries to explain. When she said those words at the lake, she invited Viola's spirit into herself. A spirit that spent centuries being distilled down to nothing more than rage, and that spirit is still within Danny. It's quiet, but it's there. And it's a beast. And one day, it will consume her. And so Jamie sits down next to her and just asks,
"Do you want company? Or you wait for your beast in the jungle?"
And did I mention I love these two so much? It's a really good bit. They just promise to keep each other company while Danny waits for her ghost. So Danny says goodbye to the Wingraves, to Flora and Miles, and Henry, who says,
I suppose I don't know how I will ever thank you.
And gives her a tearful hug. And when these two first met, Danny had told him,
I could make a difference. A real difference. With just two.
And I think he understands in this moment how right she was, maybe even more than she does. And what follows is a life. We get to watch Danny and Jamie together through the years, 10 years according to Flanagan. They get 10 years of a life together. We get to watch them choose each other and propose to each other.
You're my best friend, and I love my life. And I don't know how much time we have left. But however much it is, I want to spend it with you.
It's so sweet and domestic. We even get to see them keeping in touch with Owen. He has this restaurant that he's dedicated to Hannah. Also, another thing we learn in that scene with Owen is that both Flora and Miles have forgotten everything from Bly, and everyone seems to agree that it's for the best. But we also see that the ghost inside Danny is still there, still raging, and slowly but surely, it's coming forward. More and more, Danny keeps seeing reflections of her. And much like Owen's mother succumbing to dementia, we watch as it begins to erode Danny away. One thing I found really heartbreaking throughout the season were these meditations on dementia and loss. Through Owen, we see the kind of loss that happens when a person is still living, when someone you love is sick and everyone is waiting for the inevitable. And on the other end of the spectrum, we see Jamie, watching Danny's decline and denying it the whole way. She purposefully ignores the signs even as Danny keeps getting worse. Jamie was the one who once casually proclaimed she would rather be shot than exist as a worn-away version of herself.
Put me out of my misery. It's not fair on anyone.
I don't think fairness comes into it, dear.
But it's Danny who bites the bullet, as it were. One night, Danny wakes up from a dream of being underwater, and her hands are almost around Jamie's throat. And so Danny decides that it's time. She's becoming a risk. The Lady of the Lake is starting to take over, and she won't let that happen. So Danny goes back to Bly and drowns herself in the lake. Jamie goes after her, but it's too late. Danny's gone, taking the spirit of Viola with her, for good this time. And our narrator comes in and tells us that Danny would sleep beneath the lake like Viola had, that she too would eventually wear away, but she would simply walk the grounds of Bly as harmless as a dove for the rest of her days.
Leaving the only trace of who she once was in the memory of the woman who loved her most.
And the narrator tells us the gardener would forever look in reflections for her Lady of the Lake, and she would leave her door cracked every night, hoping her lover would return. And that's the end of the story. Back in the present, sitting around that fireplace, one woman asks the narrator,
So is it true?
Which part?
If I were to fly to England and I were to visit Bly Manor, I may get a peek of this lady in the lake?
and the narrator says,
No. I expect if you were to fly to England, you would find no such place by that name.
Then, after everybody leaves, the bride lingers to chat a little more. She says her middle name is Flora, and she found that to be an odd coincidence. And it's around here that I clocked the fact that the narrator is Jamie. I asked Mike Flanagan about the ambiguity of the story as it was told to us, and he said,
Our read on it was always that she's telling the whole story, that she's not embellishing anything or lying about anything. We looked at it as she changed the names slightly, and that she changed the name of the location. She only changed what she had to not kind of traumatize the listener.
Basically, Jamie wanted to tell Flora what Danny had sacrificed, but she had to couch it in a story, something that happened to somebody else. So Flora and Jamie have this very sweet conversation, where Flora talks about the anxiety she has over the possibility of eventually losing the love of her life, her soon-to-be husband. And Jamie tells her that, for now, she should enjoy the time she has with her love. And she says that when the time comes, it'll be hard, but she'll still have her memories of him.
And they'll be silly and dumb, or they'll be sad and you'll cry for hours. But there'll still be a piece of him.
And she says it'll be like he's still there, even though he's gone. And with that, the pair say goodnight. And the next day at the wedding reception, Jamie watches Flora and her father dance, and we see them all as they once were. Henry, Flora, Miles, Owen, and Jamie herself all appear as the versions of them we saw in the story, and it's really sweet. Then Jamie goes back to her hotel, and we see her getting ready for bed, looking in a sink filled with water, and sitting down to sleep in front of a cracked door. And here we come full circle. This was how the first episode began, with her waking up in that chair. But now we linger as she closes her eyes to sleep, and the camera pulls back to reveal Danny's hand on her shoulder. And that's the end of the show. And you know, there's a lot of good media about grief, a lot of media that explores the various nooks and crannies of it, like the documentary Dick Johnson is Dead, in which director Kirsten Johnson chronicled her experience with her father's dementia and declining health through absurdism. Her father, with remarkably good humor, plays along as they enact various death scenarios, and even an entire fake funeral which he gets to go to.
You can get it, Mom.
I got it.
Oh, wonderful. I've always wanted to be in the movies.
It would make a great double feature with Bly Manor, honestly. Or there's the film A Monster Calls, based on the novel of same name by Patrick Ness, which will tear out your heart and spit on it, and at the end you will say thank you! Because it talks about how ugly grief can be, and that's okay. Or the video game Grease, which explores grief and recovering from trauma through simple video game mechanics and color theory, and it's the best fucking thing ever. Both seasons of The Haunting explore many different aspects of death and grief. Because of their own ghostly nature, that stuff tends to come built in. And it's done excellently. We get to experience grief, trauma, and recovery from the perspective of both the living and the dead, and it's fascinating. And with Bly Manor, we get such a generational story. In season 1, the Crane story was so tight-knit. Just by virtue of them being a family, almost all the conflicts sprang from a single night when everything went wrong. But season 2 is much more sprawling. There's the story of Viola, but there's also Hannah's story, and Danny's, and Peter and Rebecca's doomed romance, Miles' downward spiral at school, Flora's fading grasp on the present, and Henry's unfixable mistakes. Another aspect that highlights the interconnectedness of this larger narrative is the way some elements repeat throughout the narratives, and I don't just mean the memories. Throughout time, we see events repeating: an unhappy marriage, an affair or the stirrings of one, a father-daughter dance, a woman crying at the edge of the lake. It almost feels like this story is folding in on itself, echoing through time. And then there's one of my favorite aspects of this season of the show. Whereas in the first season, ghosts were largely a source of terror and death, in Bly Manor, we have ghosts that are benevolent, ghosts that love and care. I know Nell was a very nice ghost in season 1, but this season we've got Rebecca and Hannah and even Danny eventually. And most of the ghosts aside from Viola are simply passive specters. As creepy as they are, they're harmless. I love when Henry tells Flora about the imaginary friend he had as a child.
He was a soldier, and I was very afraid of him. until I gave him a story.
And that's exactly what Flora does.
Now let's come up with a story. Just for you.
By the time we get to the present day, she's so comfortable with these spirits that she actually shushes a ghost. I just love that bit a lot. And then there's Danny and Edmund. She spends the first half of the season being petrified by him, but in the end, she just sits, drinking wine straight from the bottle, and tells him,
"It's just you and me then.
I love this casual attitude towards ghosts this season. There are so many aspects to death and the afterlife in this show, but I love this idea of coexistence. This idea of befriending the ghosts, even loving them. So many characters are haunted by loss, a loss of innocence, a loss of love, or even a loss of life. In the end, every character has to make peace with their traumas and come to terms with their ghosts. Jose Olivares once wrote, "My therapist says I can't make the monsters disappear, no matter how much I pay her. All she can do is bring them into the room so I can get to know them, so I can learn their names, so I can see clearly their toothless mouths, their empty hands, their pleading eyes." And then there's this shot.
That shot was the whole reason we did the season. The opening in the hotel of her waking up in the chair and the closing of her sleeping in the chair with the hand, that was clear before we had anything else with the ghosts, or I think before we had character names, we had those two shots. That seemed for a love story to be kind of the visual image of the kind of love we wanted to talk about.
I love this shot so much, but more than that, I love what it highlights. Because Flora told Owen back in episode 4,
"Dead doesn't mean gone."
It's a sentiment Miles repeated as well. It's something the children have learned in the hardest way possible, but there's another angle to it, a kinder one. Like Owen told Hannah at the beginning of episode 9.
You have loved me, so I'll always be here.
All these years later, we can see that Danny is still with Jamie, standing just beside her, even if she does eventually fade away like Jamie suggested. Her anchor isn't rage or loneliness like it was with Viola. Instead, it's love. And you know, it was E.E. Cummings who once wrote, "Here is the root of the root and the bud of the bud and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. And the rest, as they say, well, the rest is confetti." Alright, so this is another long one. Hoo boy. One day I'll be succinct, I swear. So first off, a huge thank you to Mike Flanagan for letting me interview him. Can you tell this is the first time I've ever interviewed somebody? It was cool. I would love to do more interviews if the opportunity arises again. Also, the full interview is available to watch on Nebula or on my Patreon. It was really cool. There were a lot of interesting facts I learned that I couldn't fit in here just for the sake of time, so go check that out. Second, a big thank you to my patrons whose names you saw in the credits. Y'all gave me some financial stability in 2020, and what a gift that was. In terms of what's next, well, for everybody who wanted to hear me scream about my favorite dumpster fire that is Kingdom Hearts, I am going to do a charity stream where I play Kingdom Hearts 3 for 24 hours to raise money for Trans Lifeline. I still need to work out some of the details, but there will be guests, it will be fun. We'll talk about my favorite sword boy and his cartoon dads. Keep an eye on my Twitter and the community posts on YouTube. I'll post more details when I get my shit together. And I think that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.